Bitch by Jason Bradford. Chapter 19. Severed Heads. Elizabeth's basement was built in the shape of a long crossed T. The top of the T stretched 40 feet across and was bathed in mostly shadows, as a low amount of light offered by the low wattage light bulb with the long pull cord didn't travel to those corners. What was hiding in those parts of the basement would go unseen by anyone who may venture into the darkness. It would be easy to stalk a human from that darkness if you were a monster in a nightmare, waiting for the moment to attack and suck the flesh from the victim's bones, or to boil it in a cauldron to make a potent magic if you were a witch. Elizabeth smiled at the notion. Perhaps she'd try it sometime. Even if not for magic, just for the thrill of feeling the skin and tissue being stripped away from their bones as their victims lay helpless, screaming and screaming. The 24-foot short part of the T-shaped basement offered more light. Bill sat against the wall, his strong black razor-tipped hands folded before him and locked in place. Bill lay awake. A feeling of intoxication and nausea raced through his body as he was still unable to find movement. He realized he had been drugged, but his vision was tack-sharp, and his hearing was still as powerful as it had always been. He tried to move, but his wrists were bolted with heavy black metal shackles. Bill looked to his left and was confronted with the gray concrete wall where a thick black iron chain that held his shackles was bolted. Bill tried to howl, but it was useless. The shaft of the arrow was still protruding from his chest. His heart was beating, even though it was pierced by the head of the arrow. Bill could feel the steel penetrate his heart, and the feeling it gave as the rhythmic beat slammed within his chest, gliding up and down the tip and the base of the shaft was of ice being burned with the great heat. The sensation was strange and peculiar. He knew, for some reason, it was a cause of his inability to move. All he could do was watch and listen and be acutely aware. The tip is laced with poison, Elizabeth warned. As long as that pierces your heart, you will be unable to move or be vocal. But you will know with pure clarity what is happening to you and your pack. Isn't that fun? She smiled and lifted an 8-ounce black plastic container, dipped the tip of the arrow into it, and when she pulled it out, it was covered in a thin, clear liquid with a purple shine. I learned this trick hundreds of years ago, Elizabeth continued, in Salem, when I first started my journey as a witch. The man dressed in black appeared beside her and took the arrow from her. His face was still a mystery wrapped in black cloth. The mask and leather gloves left no skin exposed. With the struggle to force his eyes as far down as he could see Karen at his feet. She was lying on her back with the pool of blood beneath her. She was lifeless, and she lay on the cold, dirty concrete floor. Bill could barely see as he continued to struggle to focus on Karen. There was what peripherally appeared to be another set of thick chains bolted to the wall. This thick iron chain was used to keep Karen in place with shackles clamped about her ankles. Bill couldn't see anything beyond that. Jack's weight created a loud, reverberating thud as he fell limply upon each step of the basement stairs. Ginger dragged him by his large back paws, using his dew claw as a gripping point for easier mobility of the unmoving beast she once knew and loved as a human. She still loved him, but only now did that love drive her to want to do bad things to him instead of sweet things. It was still the driving force behind her actions. Ginger dragged his beastly frame with her zombie strength, proving that relevance of a zombie to do heavy lifting was still indeed warranted. The motivation of the promise of a wish granted didn't hurt either. Ginger laid Jack on the floor beside Karen and at Bill's feet. She attached the heavy iron shackles to his wrists, wrenched his monstrous hairy arms behind his back, and locked the heavy chain to the heavy anchor that was embedded deeply into Elizabeth's basement wall. Good work, Elizabeth smiled at Ginger. Ginger looked down at Jack. Look what you did to me, Ginger shouted at him. This is pretty rotten, Jack. I can never do... Her lower jaw dislodged and fell off. It landed on the ground near her feet. Werewolf Jack looked in Ginger's direction as far as his eyes would allow him. He couldn't be sure, but was Ginger picking up her jaw from the ground and putting it back on her face, holding it into place? Gross. He moved his eyes to look in the opposite direction from where his rotting ex-girlfriend was falling apart and having a hard time holding herself together. Even in death, that seemed to be Ginger's fate, just as when she was among the living, falling apart, not able to hold herself together. His large muscular form wanted to strain against his shackles, but found absolutely no success in his attempts. He saw Karen lying beside him, lifeless and bloody. He tried to growl to show menace and anger, but he was met with silence and the impossibility of doing anything but observing through hearing and limited visuals. "I have something for you, Jack," Elizabeth said as she stepped beside him. She held her hand out and touched Jack's snout, and Bill watched. Elizabeth turned toward the shadows in the far corner behind her. "Bring it now," she said to someone unseen watching from the darkness. "Let's get this over with." From the darkness, a low shuffle of sound as if someone was getting items together silently rang through Elizabeth's basement. Dylan walked out and slowly approached them. He was holding a roll of silver duct tape and a black bowling ball bag. He stopped once he was standing beside Elizabeth, and he smiled wickedly as he opened the bowling ball bag and removed from it what was hidden inside. David's severed head stared blankly at Jack. His milky eyes were open and dull. Blood had blackened, and his tissue was rotting around the circumference of the neck that once held a body. The head's mouth was agape in a silent death scream, forever unheard. He handed David's head to Elizabeth. Dylan then took advantage of the situation and climbed over Jack as if Jack were no more than a furry mountain of muscle. He handed the roll of tape to Ginger. She fumbled a bit, but eventually was able to wrap it around her head enough times to keep her dislodged jaw in place. "I wouldn't speak unless I had to if I were you," Dylan told Ginger before he climbed back over Jack and stood near Elizabeth once more. Karen could hear everything, and the more things unfolded, the closer her neck came to healing, but she was unable to move. She knew Jack and Bill were as still as she was. Through the slits in her slowly opening eyes, she could see the arrows that were plunged into Jack's and Bill's chests. The large bladed knife stood tall from her own chest, and she knew these things had something to do with their inability to move or speak. Where were Tyler and Tracy? Were they safe? Would they be brought down here and shackled too? No, not Tracy, Karen considered. She wouldn't fit through the door. "I suppose it won't hurt to tell you our secret, dear," Elizabeth told Karen, for whom she was waiting to regain consciousness as Karen's eyes fluttered open and comprehended some of the situation. "We've coated the arrows and your blade with a wonderful neurotoxin called tetrodotoxin. Of course, it's also mixed with a little magic conjured up by yours truly." Elizabeth smiled as she took credit for the powerful mix that left 2 werewolves and a human consciously dead. Elizabeth looked at Ginger and the masked man in black who had made his way by Ginger's side. "Take the crossbow and neurotoxin and go outside," she ordered. "The others will come soon. It's almost midnight." "Wait!" shouted Dylan to Ginger as she turned to leave. Ginger faced him, still holding her jaw, even though it was held securely for now by an obnoxious amount of silver duct tape. Her single milky eye gazed at him, waiting for his next request. "Your cat-and-mouse plan worked perfectly, Ginger," Dylan told the rotting woman. He looked at Elizabeth, and the two exchanged a smile before focusing back on Ginger. "You've earned a wish. Anything you want, I will grant." "Come on," Karen thought. "Move!" She tried to wiggle her toes, but there was nothing. She tried her fingers. The tips were healed from where the werewolf nails had torn their way out, so she knew the process was making progress. Her intentions, once back on her full strength and abilities, was completely murderous. She'd be the biggest bitch they had ever seen. Heeding Dylan's advice not to talk at the moment, and as she pondered exactly what she would wish for, she remained silent, thinking. Dylan made suggestions. "We can obliterate him when we're finished here," he said. "Toss his body in the swamp like he had done yours." Ginger looked at Jack. Still, she was silent. Her eye widened in excitement at the thought of what she could do. Visions of Jack having sex with her rotted and mutilated frame filled her mind. She would bend over, since he obviously liked to fuck doggy style, and he would slide himself deep into her rotting chasm, and they would thrust their hips in rhythm. Then Ginger imagined her leg falling off and her falling over and losing her arm in the process. She imagined this would all happen before she got to come. Jack would probably finish, however. This thought ignited a spark of rage. No, not sex. That might not be a good idea after all. "Perhaps we make him obsess over you," Dylan continued. "Make him your dog." Ginger paused and smiled a sly, wicked grin. She reached up with her rotted fingers, the bone shining through her middle finger where there once was flesh. She held her jawbone in place while she spoke. "I want full control over him. she finally wished. Nothing I tell him to do can be refused or denied. Dylan smiled at the deliciousness of her warped request. Very well, he agreed. Anything you demand cannot be refused. It must be done. The smile on Ginger's face spread. Your wish, Dylan promised, is my command. Ginger's right ear fell off and smacked the concrete ground with a soft, wet splat, but her wicked grin remained. She knew she should have put tape over them. Maybe she should have asked Dylan to make her indestructible, like a vampire. He was a genie, after all, and could have done it. He would have had no choice. Oh well. She'd just have to make sure tape was on hand at all times. Now go, Dylan insisted, and do as you're told, and bring me anything that comes along. We have plenty of room down here. The two did as told, Ginger taking the black plastic container that held the tetrodotoxin from Elizabeth, leaving Elizabeth and Dylan standing with their 3 prisoners. Elizabeth took David's severed head from Dylan. She took a few steps down the length of Jack's outstretched body until she found herself near his shackled hands. She placed the gaping mouth around Jack's forefingers and forced it to travel down the open throat of the dead man's head. Elizabeth slammed the bottom jaw with her other fist, and David's mouth clamped shut around Jack's finger. She watched as he placed the head back in the bowling ball bag. Well done, Dylan said. Now, we just wait a few more minutes, and at midnight, we'll have the human Jack to entertain in our own home. He smiled for the first time, showing how unnatural his grin could really be. It stretched from ear to ear wider than a human would be able to smile. The 6-year-old boy looked demonic, like a monster that belonged in the shadows of the basement they were in. Boris twitched and stirred. His mind was clouded with thoughts of Elsa, Victoria, Titanic, and Tyler. He had to get to Tyler and warn him of what happened. What was it? Oh, why did he have to forget so much when it wasn't safe to do so? He flew high into the sky looking for familiar landmarks. The bonfire's soft beacon called him home. He fluttered toward it, not looking back. He reached home and noticed Tracy and Tyler sleeping near the fallen tree. He swooped down and landed on Tyler's face, hoping to wake him. Instinctively, Tyler opened his jaws and slammed them down hard on Boris. Waking up after the fact that he had tried to eat, Boris sank into consciousness. Tyler spit the saliva-covered fruit bat out of his mouth. You have to go. The pack is in trouble. Boris didn't miss a beat. Ginger is back. Tyler, not feeling the urgency to wake Tracy, ran off into the forest toward Elizabeth's house, leaving Tracy and Green behind. Boris followed Tyler from above, keeping Tyler in sight as they both sped along to their destination.